Are you a fan of pro wrestling, comedy, and combat sports? Then we have the podcast for you because we cover that and much, much more.
Do you like to debate with your friends? Do we have the perfect segment for you? It's the 531, where we take any given subject, break it down to a top 5. From there, we debate it down to 3, and then into that number 1.
Are you a fan of pro wrestling, comedy, and combat sports? Then we have the podcast for you because we cover that and much, much more.
Do you like to debate with your friends? Do we have the perfect segment for you? It's the 531, where we take any given subject, break it down to a top 5. From there, we debate it down to 3, and then into that number 1 spot.
If you want to get a hold of us, find us on our social medias. Search Working Fans Podcast on any major social media platform. And if you want to find the podcast, search for us on any major podcast platform, as well as YouTube.
Working Fans Podcast. We put in the work so you don't have to.
Guys, welcome back for another dose of the Working Fans Podcast daily content. We are brought to you by Super Vows by Kevin Kelton, as well as Pas de Deux, Dance of Two. We are brought to you by AO Money Meech, Camouflage, When the Deadbolt Breaks, Buzzard Canyon, the great people over at Connecticut People Records, and our new wrestling commentary home of New Heights Wrestling. And you always hear us talk about this book, the Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 1. And today we are talking wrestling books because coming off the wrestling burnout, I wanted to kind of dig into some of my favorite wrestling books. And this is only going to be Volume 1 because just like the Pro Wrestling Vault, there's so many books that I enjoy that, I'm just bringing you kind of a short list, short summary. This will be a future segment, but there you can see Wrestleville. You saw the graphic at the top. And this book is great because there's so many short stories about wrestling in it that it's not like another book where you're like, when you start it, you're in for the whole thing. This one, you can read, a couple stories, put it down. But I found myself when I'd read one person's story, I'd continue on to the next one. And then I'd go like 5 stories in, and then I'd hit the pictures. And I would have to look through all of the pictures because there's so many, and there's from so many places, like indies that I've heard of or people that that are big stars now that I'm like, oh, look, they wrestled there then. So each book comes autographed by one of 14 wrestlers featured in it. And, you've got wrestlers such as Harley Race, Tracy Smothers, Ricky Morton, Bobby Fulton, Tim Storm, C.W. Anderson, Bill Dundee, Larry Hennig, all stories from them about them in this book. And it's available at Wrestleville.com. This book is $19.95, $4.95 shipping from Wrestleville. But another book is Lance by Chance. Let me throw that graphic up there for you. And this was Vinnie Barry's first book. And this is $20.95 for a signed copy with the $4.95 shipping, or $17.95 for an unsigned copy. And if you want to hear what Texas was like when the Von Erichs were there, it's in this book. If you want to hear how he made it to becoming a Von Erich, even his start in the Pacific Northwest, and then eventually traveling down to Texas and being a part of the Von Erich family. And then I always put over this part of the book more is when he moves to South Africa. He talks about biking across Africa and so much more. And that book, like his life outside of wrestling, is almost way more interesting than the inner workings. But, there's chapters on Gino Hernandez, Kerry Von Erich, Ric Flair. Like, it's about the territory and then specific stories about specific people. And another book I wanted to mention to you, I got it a while ago, The World According to Dutch. I ordered this from Dutch Mantel so I could get it signed. Got a WCW card with it, and this guy just has so many stories. Like, if you've ever listened to his podcast, you know he's got stories for days. He's got 2 books. I got one of them, and this one was very hard to put down. You know, he's a great storyteller, chock full of stories. His stories span territories and years. He talks about Memphis, Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman, TNA creating the Knockouts division, working in Puerto Rico, and working with people like Stone Cold, The Undertaker, and Kane. This book, I mean, I recommend Lance by Chance in the Pro Wrestling Vault, but if you want to get into one of the greatest wrestling minds, Dutch Mantel breaks it down amazingly. And you know this man. We've had him on our show before. George South. Dad, you don't work, you wrestle. This is available at georgesouth.com. And I think I got this for like $20. And, you know, he'll sign it for you. And he's another one. Very good storyteller. Has stories about so many people. He's got pictures of, like, lots of pictures in here. Very thick book. And he has another one that I am getting. That book was $23 on georgesouth.com. The newer one I got is $20. I believe it's called The Last Wrestler. And when I put the PayPal order through, forgot to put a note for him to sign it. He emailed me and asked me if I wanted him to sign the book and gave me a number to get back to him at. George South is a #1 guy, and like, you will love that book. That got me through a lot of breaks at work, because when I was at the grocery store, hated it, and especially during the holiday season. But coming out, reading a chapter out of George's book, it gave me the energy to go back in. Now, I am ending this segment on probably my favorite wrestling book that I've heard. Backlund, From All American Boy to Professional Wrestling's World Champion. I got it. I bought it off him at a library here in Jewett City, where he was doing a little talk and book signing. And when I got this book, I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. There's so many interesting things about this book. Like, there's a foreword by Roddy Piper. Oh, the foreword on George South's book, written by Ted DiBiase. And then he has testimonials from a bunch of other wrestlers. But getting back to Backlund, foreword by Roddy Piper. This is where I actually learned about Napoleon Hill and the power of positive thinking, PMA, that Kevin Gill had mentioned. And, each chapter starts with a Napoleon Hill quote. You get to see how Backlund grew up. You get to hear about his time before the WWF, because you think Bob Backlund, you mainly think WWF champion in the early 70s, but he had a run in Texas. He had a run in Florida. He was in the Mid-Atlantic area for a little while. So you get his memories about time in those areas. But to me, what really made it is he really details how Vince Sr. booked a WWF champion and how matches paid off for the next event, how usually a feud would go 3 matches unless it got hot, then it could go 4. And just hearing him break down all those kind of stories, I thought was super interesting. And like, this is a book I didn't want to end because I just loved reading it. I'll probably dig back in a future time, because just hearing how that WWF title was booked then is fascinating. When now it seems like there's almost less thought put into it. And like I said, this is going to be volume 1, because I have a bunch of books on deck. I am partway through Pure Dynamite. That's the Dynamite Kid book. I've got John Arezzi's Map Memories. I got the Dusty Rhodes book, the Andre the Giant book that Pat LaPrade did, Bill Watts book, and a History of Stampede Wrestling. There's like a Bruce Hart book in there. I got the Moxley book. So I'm sure by the end of summer, we will have another wrestling book episode for you. Or even a deep dive, because this is just daily content. And let us know what wrestling books you like. Death of the Territories is one that I will, talk about at a future time, but that was another really good one. The Chris Benoit book, written by Matthew Randazzo, is another fascinating book. So let us know what you're reading, and, we will talk to you again next time.